All right, thank you, Mitchell. So next up, we've got Rachel Nabors, who is, I think, the true definition of a craftsperson based out of Portland, Oregon. Rachel is passionate about animation, and a few interesting things here. So she curates webanimationweekly.com, which brings together a range of resources around animation. But Rachel's passion is not just about, it's not necessarily focused on things like cartoons. It's about the nuance of how motion plays a role in our lives and how we consume websites and technology and content. And she's been very active with the W3C. And she's also, I think, one of the only speakers that I've ever heard of that's hand-drawn her slides as well. So this is going to be pretty interesting. So give Rachel a very warm welcome, please.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. All right, let's get this on. So how many of you went out and partied last night? I did not. I stayed home and tried to get some sleep, which I failed miserably at. So this is going to be a fun keynote. In the previous keynote, you got lots of things to think about. But for mine, I'm going to make you participate because I'm cruel like that. We're going to have a little quiz, and then you get to listen to me tell a story from me olden times, back when I was a front-end developer full-time instead of messing around with this animation stuff. We will talk a little bit about that, but first, quizzes. So, do you ever find that you have problems with people having trouble figuring out what your project does? Come on. I know some of you have this problem. You gotta raise your hands or I'm not gonna move to the next slide. There we go. There we go. Thank you. I can twist it. So, do folks struggle to navigate or use your project or its resources? Yeah, this happens to you. Or perhaps you lack a logo, so speakers like myself can't grab them, and we end up using screenshots of your repo. True story. Or is your audience choosing your competitor despite your technological superiority? Yeah, okay, that one does happen. Trust me, it does. So yes, I'm Rachel Nabors. If you raised your hand, you really want to hear this. You probably need design as a feature. Okay. Maybe you're putting design off until the very end. I've heard this a lot. Working on the front-end development and design sides of small and medium-sized companies and on open source projects, you often hear, well, that's not really important. We're going to focus on functionality right now. Or maybe your project is technically wowzers, and you think it doesn't need any design. It's so great. This is a meritocracy. It's going to stand on its own. People are just going to instinctively know where to find the best product, and they're going to instinctively understand how to install it. Or maybe you know you need design help, but you're really stumped on how you're going to get it. Designers, what are those? How do you find those? Or maybe you'd like to work with designers, but you don't feel you have the time or need to prioritize onboarding them or integrating them into your process. I've run into this one quite a bit myself. We really need your help. We don't have time to help you help us. Okay, keep limping along there. I've seen all these I'm sorry, I'm so tired that I have like no filter, so you're getting it this morning. I've seen all these symptoms before. Yes, I have. Let me tell you that story. A tale from my early days as a front-end developer. Anybody use CSS in this audience? Yay! I love CSS. Okay, so anybody use SAS in this audience? Not SAS, SASS, syntactically awesome style sheets. Okay, I like your hands, they're in their air. SAS is awesome, we all know it is the best, right? It is the best. For those of you who do not know, SAS is this, it takes CSS, which you write to mark up web pages so they look pretty, and SAS is an even more efficient way of doing that. Lots of don't repeat yourself, lots of helpers and mix-ins and programmatical functions, so you can make really great style sheets without having to break your back over them. It's one of those things you saw on the curves just a few moments ago. SAS is definitely on that curve. Back in 2011, I fell in love with SAS because it made my CSS so much more fun and easier to work with. But SAS had a competitor in less, LESS. It probably stands for something syntactic style sheets. They all have double S's in their endings. So SAS was superior in many ways, but LESS had this really great site that was totally accessible to designers, and designers were doing a lot of transition into front-end development at that time. Still are. Now notice this, you've got this fork me on GitHub, and then here's how you write it, you include this JavaScript in your style sheets, and boom. And also there's a download button. All of it's above the fold, it's like onboard. Now compare that with the SAS site, where it goes on about its technical merits, gets into variables and nesting. It's like, whoa, what is that? Gem install HAML. What the heck is HAML? Okay, that was a journey of discovery for Rachel. So yeah, LESS was getting a lot of traction in the designer to front-end developer, market. Now, SAS's creators knew that SAS was obviously the best tool for the job, right? So how is this little thing, LESS, getting in their way? It doesn't scale. What's going on here? They were they were losing market share to the inferior tool. And I use quote marks around inferior because LESS was actually doing a number of things better than SAS was with connecting and educating its market and engaging its audience. And I want to apologize to Chris Epstein because I had difficulty drawing his beard. All right. So first thing they did was the team started letting go of things that they thought were important. SAS uses the HAML syntax. Guess what? Most people who want to use beefy style sheets, they want to use CSS's syntax because they understand CSS first. So that was new. They had to build in a new format. They didn't drop HAML, they kept it. They just also brought in some CSS-ier syntaxes. They also pulled it out of the HAML repo and then pulled it away from the Rails project so that it could stand on its own. Later on, went on to have libsass, some other things, so it was more JavaScript-based and people didn't have to have Ruby on their system. These were really important technical leaps that had to be done to open up their market and meet their users in the field. Now, to Chris Epstein and Natalie Weizenbaum's credit, they reached out to the very audience they were losing at that time. That is to say, they reached out to designers, and designers answered. SAS opened its doors to these designers, this community, and gave Gina Bolton free reign over the design, the style guides, the logo. That actually was done by Berman Painter. Basically, they had all these folks come in and offer to help, and Gina Bolton was the kind of that made the design lead to help guide SAS to a better place. They were really fortunate to have passionate designers who cared so much. And here's what they accomplished. Now, onboarding is kind of a big issue with any new tool. Without it, this beginner's eye, without this acceptance that not everybody is going to be a domain expert when they come to your project, SAS's devs were kind of blind to that, and their audience was just looking at that page and running away. So they needed to improve the onboarding section. The old site, the old installation, it just lumped installation in with tutorials. So you got install Ruby and SAS. Good luck if you have Windows. And then all the features, because that's what you came here for, right? The features. The new site, they split it into two sections. One for learning SAS, which introduces people to the whole concept of pre-processing terminology and programming ideas. And then there's an installation page, this one here, which shows how to install it via apps and via the command line. So they managed to take care of those poor folks who don't know the command line, or they're on a machine that makes the command line very difficult. Now, when we want somebody to use something, we must give them a clear reason to do so. We got to give them a value proposition. It's not enough to just expect people to know why you're awesome and invest their time in you. You got to say, this is what makes us awesome, and you should invest time in us. This is very important. If you've ever been an entrepreneur, this can be some of the hardest stuff to get down after contributing to open source for so long, where you're praised for just giving it your all. The old SaaS site did talk quite a bit about its technical merit, quite a bit. But if you're just looking to implement something on a new project at an agency, you're probably not going to spend time digging around figuring out what all this means and why it's relevant. The new site literally says, it's CSS with superpowers. How much more clear can you get? You use CSS, you want CSS with superpowers. Boom, use SAS. Here, there's a learn link, go for it. So last but not least, any project is its own identity, its own brand. Its brand is what lets people identify it on stage or in a theme that they're purchasing and downloading. When you look for that special icon, that logo, that name, that color, this lets us know, I know this, I can do this. Or, oh, you know, I've been seeing this a lot lately. Branding is important. It doesn't get quite as much credit in open source as I wish it did. So we went from this kind of sexist clip art, no designer respects clip art in a logo, by the way. I think that's clip art, a logo to this one by Berman, which is still sassy. Pretty awesome, right? Good job, Berman Painter. The logo use is detailed in the brand guidelines, which, look at this, you can't possibly mess up using this logo. It's clearly and explicitly stated. I love it, attention to detail. Those guidelines are part of the style guides, which show how the site should be displayed, which covers things like color and grids and layout, and even how your code should be marked up when you're committing. So style guides cover more than just look and feel. They also cover contribution arrangements. So let's put these lessons to work. I just told you one story. I have 15 minutes. I could tell you others, and I could make a bunch of case arguments and show you numbers, et cetera. But the great thing about having 15 minutes is that I can just tell you a story and then be like, here's some actionables, see you later. So let's get on with the actionables. So number one, when SaaS started competing on design as well as technical prowess, they accessed a market of new users, not just designers. People who were just getting started in front-end development, people who weren't familiar with using command lines. They were accessing so many kinds of people, or people who were unable to use the particular, like not using Rails, not using Haml, et cetera. They opened up their market to a whole lot of new users. And the best thing about that was that those users went on to become contributors and collaborators. Now, partly this was because the SaaS repo team, the people who were core maintaining it, were so generous with their time and worked so hard with people who came in and said, I want to help. They did not immediately dismiss them as like, well, we don't have time to train you. They were like, yes, we believe that you do have something valuable to share with us. And they took that time, and they ended up with this really wonderful feedback loop, which basically they kept bringing new people in, new people wanted to help, and it enriched their core contributor base. And I think that this feedback loop actually sent ripples out throughout the front-end development community. For a lot of designers, SAS was their first introduction to programming concepts or the command line. I had switched to a Mac for SAS. That was before we had libsas. And it really did change the makeup, I think, for many communities of who was contributing and who was working. And part of that was because they were working with designers. All right, so you need designers, but where are you going to find them and how do you keep them? I know this is a big issue. First of all, go to the mountain. Don't wait for designers to fall in your lap. That is a really lazy way of waiting for good things to happen to you. Go to AIGA, go to your local Dribble meetup chapters. When you're doing a hackathon, have a design-a-thon right alongside it. Designers don't get paid as much as programmers. Acknowledge that. Offer some bounties to help bring some interest in. And SAS was lucky. A lot of designers were working with CSS at the time. You probably have a project that designers don't care about. Make them care about it. Incentivize them. Also, I'm sorry. Most importantly, trust designers as you would a fellow developer. Respect their work as you would like others to respect yours. Don't constantly question them or ask them to show numbers that blue is the right color for the link. Industries, families, empires, and yes, award-winning projects are all built on trust. If you do not have trust, you do not have a team. All right, so developers hate it when someone comes to them and says, just fix this, right? You know, I don't care what the underlying problems are, you can fix it. And in the meantime, your hands are completely tied, you're not allowed to actually address the underlying problems. Well, designers hate that too. Just make it look pretty, you can do that, right? It just needs like a pretty button or like a bounce or something on it. Just make it razzle-dazzle. It doesn't need a grid, what? No. The boss likes the old logo we got in 1980s. We don't need to change that. When you find your designer, empower them to actually lead that effort. If they say something a little dodgy and you're like, whoa, changing the link color, I don't know how I feel about that. Say, I trust you to do what's best. That will go a long way. So, design should be one of a project's many excellent features. We should not relegate it to being a bug ticket. Thank you all, and thank you All Things Open for hosting such a wonderful, wonderful conference.